When I heard frantic knocking at my farmhouse door during the worst thunderstorm in years, I never expected to find a soaking wet, heavily pregnant young woman seeking shelter. Living alone since my wife Sarah passed away 3 years ago, I thought I was just helping a stranded traveler reach her aunt's house. You won't believe what happened next. I never expected Lucy to give birth in my living room during the storm, or that the silver locket around her neck would reveal a family secret that Sarah had kept hidden for decades. Sometimes the most powerful storms bring exactly what we need to heal our broken hearts. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Life's Changing Stories. Now, let's dive into today's story. Max's daily routine on the 200-acre farm had become predictable and methodical since Sarah's heart attack had claimed her life without warning. On a sunny Tuesday morning, while she was tending to her vegetable garden, he would wake at dawn, tend to the small herd of cattle and handful of horses they had raised together, maintain the property with the careful attention to detail that Sarah had always appreciated, and spend his evenings reading or working on small repair projects that kept his hands busy while his mind wandered through decades of cherished memories. The farmhouse itself sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, 5 miles from their nearest neighbors, surrounded by rolling pastures and the oak trees that Sarah had planted when they were newlyweds, full of dreams about the family they would raise and the life they would build together in the peaceful countryside. Their 2 children had grown up and moved to distant cities for careers and families of their own, visiting occasionally but living lives too busy and complicated to spend much time in the quiet rural setting where they had been raised. On this particular evening in late October, after spending the afternoon repairing fence posts damaged by the previous week's windstorm, Max had settled into his evening routine of heating leftover soup and preparing to spend another quiet night reading by the fire. The weather forecast had mentioned possible thunderstorms, but Max had lived on the farm long enough to know that rural weather could change without warning, especially during the unpredictable autumn months. Outside, what had started as a gentle evening rain was rapidly developing into something much more serious and potentially dangerous. Max could hear the wind beginning to howl around the corners of the old farmhouse, and the steady patter of raindrops on the tin roof was increasing to a drumming that suggested a major storm system was moving through the area with unexpected intensity and speed. Max Roberts stood in his kitchen, stirring a pot of vegetable soup and listening to the increasingly violent weather outside his farmhouse windows. At 62, he had lived on this property for his entire adult life, first as a young husband, building a future with his beloved Sarah, then as a father, raising their children in the countryside, and now as a widower trying to find meaning in the daily routines that had once been shared responsibilities and joyful family traditions. Sarah's death, 3 years earlier, had left Max struggling to adjust to a solitude he had never expected to experience after 40 years of marriage. Their farmhouse, which had once been filled with the sounds of family dinners, holiday gatherings, and the constant activity of rural life, now felt enormous and empty, despite being the same modest size it had always been. During their marriage, Sarah had been the social center of their family, maintaining relationships with relatives, organizing holiday celebrations, and ensuring that their home remained a gathering place for children, grandchildren, and extended family members. Max had been content to focus on the practical aspects of farm management, while Sarah handled the emotional and social dimensions of their shared life. Since Sarah's passing, Max had maintained minimal contact with their adult children, who lived busy lives in urban areas and seemed to view their rural childhood as something they had outgrown, rather than a foundation to be cherished and preserved. Their visits had become increasingly rare, and Max had gradually accepted that his remaining years would likely be spent in the quiet companionship of his animals and the familiar routines of farm life. Max had been looking forward to another peaceful evening of reading and reflection when the storm began developing with unusual intensity and speed. Within an hour, what had appeared to be a typical autumn rain shower had transformed into a violent thunderstorm with driving rain, dangerous winds, and lightning that illuminated the countryside in dramatic flashes of brilliant white light. Around 9:30 p.m., as Max was banking the fire in his living room fireplace and preparing to settle in for the evening, he heard something that made him pause and listen carefully. Over the noise of the storm, he could distinctly hear what sounded like urgent, desperate knocking at his front door. Max immediately felt concerned and puzzled about who could possibly be traveling on the remote country roads that led to his property during such dangerous weather conditions. His nearest neighbors lived 5 miles away, and the gravel road that served his farmhouse was not a route that casual travelers would use, especially during a severe thunderstorm that was making driving treacherous and potentially life-threatening. The knocking continued with increasing urgency, and Max quickly made his way to the front door, turning on the porch light and peering through the window to see who was outside seeking help during such a violent storm. When Max opened the heavy wooden door, he was shocked to find a young woman standing on his covered porch, completely soaked despite the roof overhead, shivering uncontrollably and clearly in the advanced stages of pregnancy. Her long brown hair was plastered to her head. Her clothes were drenched and clinging to her obviously swollen belly, and her face showed the exhaustion and desperation of someone who had been struggling against the elements for an extended period. "Please," she said through chattering teeth, her voice barely audible over the wind and rain. "My car broke down about half a mile back. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I saw your light and didn't know where else to go." Max immediately stepped aside and gestured for her to enter the warm, dry interior of his farmhouse. Come in right away," he said urgently. "You'll catch pneumonia standing out there in this weather." The young woman stepped gratefully into the entrance hall, dripping water onto the hardwood floors and wrapping her arms around herself in an attempt to control her shivering. "I'm Lucy Hamilton," she said, extending a trembling hand in greeting. "I'm so sorry to impose on you like this." "No need to apologize," Max replied immediately, his natural instincts to help others in distress overriding any concerns about having an unexpected visitor. "I'm Max Roberts. Let's get you dried off and warmed up before you catch your death of cold." Max led Lucy into the living room, where the fireplace still contained glowing embers from the fire he had been enjoying earlier in the evening. The room remained largely unchanged since Sarah's death, with her favorite reading chair positioned near the hearth, her collection of books still arranged on the built-in shelves, and the family photographs that documented decades of their life together displayed on the mantelpiece and side tables. "I'll get you some dry clothes," Max said, hurrying upstairs to the bedroom where he still kept several of Sarah's sweaters, flannel shirts, and comfortable pants in the dresser drawers and closet. He selected a soft flannel shirt and a pair of sweatpants that he thought would fit Lucy's pregnant figure, along with warm socks and a thick cotton robe that would help restore her body temperature. When Max returned to the living room with the dry clothing, Lucy was standing near the fireplace with her hands extended toward the residual warmth, still shivering but beginning to show some color returning to her pale cheeks. "These belong to my wife," Max explained, offering her the bundle of clothing. "She passed away 3 years ago, but I think they'll fit you. The bathroom is just down the hall if you would like to change and get out of those wet things." Lucy accepted the clothes with obvious gratitude, her eyes filling with tears at the kindness being shown by this stranger who had opened his home to her without hesitation. "Thank you so much," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here." While Lucy changed into the dry clothing, Max busied himself building up the fire and preparing hot tea to help warm her from the inside. He also heated a bowl of the vegetable soup he had been eating for dinner, thinking that she probably hadn't had a proper meal if she had been traveling in this weather. When Lucy returned to the living room, wearing Sarah's flannel shirt and sweatpants, Max was struck by how young she appeared, probably in her mid-20s, and how the stress and exhaustion of her ordeal had left her looking vulnerable and fragile, despite her obvious strength and determination. "Feeling better?" Max asked, gesturing for her to sit in the comfortable chair closest to the fireplace, while he poured hot tea and served the soup he had prepared. "Much better, thank you," Lucy replied, settling carefully into the chair and accepting the warm mug with hands that were finally beginning to steady. "I was trying to reach my aunt's house in Riverside, but my GPS led me down your road, and then my car just died and started smoking. I was afraid it might catch fire." "You're pretty far from Riverside," Max observed, settling into his own chair across from her. "That's about 20 miles from here, and not many people know about this old farm road. What's your aunt's name? I might know her if she's been in the area long." Before Lucy could answer, she suddenly gasped and pressed her hand to her swollen belly, her face contorting with obvious pain as a contraction gripped her body. "Are you all right?" Max asked with immediate concern, recognizing the signs of labor from his experience with farm animals and the distant memories of his own children's births. Lucy breathed slowly through the contraction before responding. "I'm 9 months pregnant and due any day now," she admitted. "I think all this stress and the cold rain might have triggered something. That was definitely a contraction." As if responding to her words, the lights in the farmhouse suddenly flickered and then went out completely, leaving them in the dancing shadows created by the fireplace flames. The storm outside seemed to intensify, with thunder rolling continuously overhead and rain hammering against the windows with increasing force. Max quickly located the emergency candles and flashlights that he always kept ready for power outages, lighting several candles around the living room to provide adequate light for whatever might happen next. "The contractions are about 20 minutes apart," Lucy said, timing the next one, while Max arranged the candles on stable surfaces throughout the room. "I was hoping to reach my aunt before the baby came, but it looks like Mother Nature has other plans." Max studied Lucy's face in the candlelight and noticed something that had escaped his attention earlier. There was something familiar about her features, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the determined set of her jaw, even in the midst of obvious distress. She reminded him strongly of Sarah at that age, though he couldn't immediately identify why the resemblance seemed so pronounced. "Tell me about your aunt," Max said, settling back into his chair and trying to keep Lucy calm and distracted from her discomfort. "What brings you to see her after all this time?" Lucy looked down at her hands, which were wrapped around the warm mug of tea. "Her name is Sarah Roberts. At least that was her maiden name before she got married. I've never actually met her, but my mother told me to look her up if I ever needed help. And right now, I need help more than I've ever needed it in my life." Max's spoon clattered to the floor as shock washed over him. "Sarah Roberts was my wife," he said slowly, his voice filled with amazement and confusion. "But Sarah never had any siblings. She was an only child." Lucy looked up at him with surprise, then reached beneath Sarah's flannel shirt and pulled out a delicate silver locket that had been hidden beneath the fabric. The locket was tarnished with age, but still beautiful, with an intricate heart-shaped design and a small engraved flower that Max recognized immediately. "This was my mother's," Lucy said softly, opening the locket to reveal a faded photograph of 2 young women with unmistakable similarities in their facial features. Her name was Catherine Hamilton, but she was born Catherine Roberts. She said she and her sister Sarah had a terrible fight when they were young, and they never spoke again. My mother regretted it for the rest of her life." Max stared at the photograph in stunned silence, recognizing a much younger version of his beloved Sarah standing next to another woman who shared many of the same features. The locket itself was identical to one he had given Sarah on their 20th wedding anniversary, which she had treasured and worn regularly until her death. "Sarah never told you about her sister?" Lucy asked gently, seeing the shock and confusion on Max's weathered face. Another strong contraction interrupted their conversation, and Lucy gripped the arms of her chair as the pain washed over her body. "They're getting closer," she said through gritted teeth. "Maybe 15 minutes apart now." Max forced himself to focus on the immediate situation despite the emotional turmoil created by Lucy's revelation about Sarah's hidden family history. "I've helped deliver my own children and more farm animals than I can count," he said with quiet confidence. "If this baby decides to come tonight, we'll manage just fine." "I trust you," Lucy said simply, her eyes reflecting both physical pain and emotional vulnerability. Max gathered clean towels, sterile scissors, and strong string from his supply closet, his mind racing with questions about Sarah's secret sister and Lucy's true reasons for seeking them out during this critical time in her life. Over the next several hours, as Lucy's contractions became more frequent and intense, she shared the story of her mother Catherine's life and the regret that had haunted her until her death 6 months earlier. Catherine had been the restless sister who left home seeking adventure and independence, while Sarah had been content to remain in the familiar countryside and build a stable, traditional life. "My mother was too proud to reach out after their fight," Lucy explained between contractions that were now coming every 10 minutes. "But she kept track of Sarah from a distance. She knew Sarah had married you and had children, but she was too ashamed of how she'd acted to try to make contact." Max told Lucy about Sarah's life on the farm, their 40-year marriage, their children and grandchildren, and the contentment Sarah had found in the simple rhythms of rural life. He also gently told Lucy that Sarah had passed away 3 years earlier from a sudden heart attack. "You're not too late, though," Max assured her as midnight approached and the storm reached its peak intensity. "Sarah left behind children and grandchildren who would be your cousins. You're not alone in this world." Just after midnight, as the thunder seemed to shake the very foundations of the farmhouse, Lucy announced that the baby was coming immediately. Max, drawing on decades of experience with farm births and the distant memories of his own children's arrivals, guided Lucy through the delivery with calm competence and gentle encouragement. When the baby's cries finally filled the living room, competing with the sound of the storm outside, Max announced with joy, "It's a beautiful baby girl," placing the healthy infant in Lucy's exhausted but triumphant arms. "Sarah," Lucy whispered, looking down at her daughter with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Little Sarah, after the aunt I never got to meet." As dawn broke and the storm finally began to subside, Max studied Lucy's face and saw even more clearly the family resemblance that connected her to his beloved wife. The same determined spirit, the same gentle strength, the same capacity for love that had made Sarah such an extraordinary woman. "I need to tell you something," Lucy said, as sunlight began filtering through the windows. "I didn't just come looking for Sarah. I came looking for you too. My mother told me stories about Sarah's husband, about what a good man you were, and how happy Sarah was here on the farm." Lucy explained that she had come to find them because she had nowhere else to turn. Her mother had died, the baby's father had abandoned her, and she had no job, no home, and no one to help her raise her child. "The locket was the only valuable thing my mother left me," Lucy admitted, "and I couldn't bring myself to sell it because it was my only connection to the family I'd never known." Max looked at this young woman holding his great niece, seeing in her face the continuation of Sarah's family line and the answer to the loneliness that had haunted him since Sarah's death. "You have me now," he said firmly. "Both of you. This is your home for as long as you want it to be." 6 months later, Max stood at his kitchen window, watching Lucy hang laundry on the clothesline while little Sarah played in a portable playpen nearby. The farmhouse once again filled with the sounds of life, laughter, and family activity that had been missing since Sarah's death. Lucy had settled seamlessly into the rhythms of farm life, handling cooking and household management, while Max returned to his agricultural work with renewed energy and purpose. They spent their evenings sharing stories about the two sisters and the different paths their lives had taken, helping each other understand the family history that had shaped their present circumstances. Max had reached out to his own children, who had been skeptical about Lucy's claims until they saw the locket and looked into little Sarah's eyes, which unmistakably carried the family resemblance that connected all of them. The old farmhouse had rung with laughter for the first time in years during a family reunion that brought together cousins who had never known they existed. The emptiness that had haunted Max since Sarah's death had been filled not with a replacement for what he had lost, but with a continuation of the love and family bonds that had always been the true foundation of his happiness. The farmhouse now sheltered 3 generations of the Roberts family, and Max held his great-niece each evening, knowing that this was exactly where they all belonged. Sometimes the most powerful storms in life clear away what no longer serves us and make room for the new growth and unexpected blessings that can transform our deepest sorrows into our greatest joys. The family we find can be just as precious as the family we're born into, and the love we thought we had lost forever can return to us in forms we never imagined possible. We hope you enjoyed today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.